Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about our circle of influence as opposed to our circle of concern. And this is the second in my 8-part series on Stephen Covey's life-changing book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And today we're going to look at Covey's first suggested habit, which is to be proactive. And being proactive is different than being reactive, because when we're proactive, we're taking responsibility for our life, our actions, and our decisions, instead of letting people, places, and things dictate our behavior. When we're reacting to circumstances, the circumstances are in control. And when we are responding to circumstances, we are choosing our behavior, our responses, based on our values and principles rather than on our emotions or habituated patterns. Now, if you like your habits and patterns, then that's fine, because if we do what we always did, we're going to get what we always got. And so if you're getting what you want in your life, outstanding. But if you're not getting what you want in your life, being proactive can be a huge perspective change from being a victim to being empowered, from being powerless to having choice, agency, and creative energy that's actually available in every area of our life. And if you can think of immediately some places in your life that you're totally powerless, where you feel stuck or victimized, those are the places that will benefit most from this first habit of being proactive. And so one of the aspects of proactivity is taking responsibility, recognizing that we have the ability to respond and that we can make choices in our responses. That even though there may be infinite people, places, and things that we don't have control over, we do have control over our response to the circumstances and situations in our life. And it is our responses that actually create our experience of reality. And proactive people respond based on conscious choices rather than emotions or conditions or these external pressures. And these are often the unconscious habits that keep us stuck in old ways of being. And most of the great spiritual traditions and most good psychology or therapy helps us to become more conscious, to move out of unconsciousness. And the more conscious we become, the more able we are to respond rather than react, and to become more responsible. When we're unconscious, we can be like a drunk cowboy in a barn shooting his gun. Pew, 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 pew. How do I work this thing? As opposed to being a marksman, intensely focusing on a target. Now, people might not like the gun metaphor, but I grew up with guns. My father was a competitive handgun shooter, and I spent a lot of time spotting for him, which is when you sit next to the shooter with a telescope and you look at where the shots are going, because the sights are different on each weapon and each weapon is different. And a marksman needs to make compensations. They need to be conscious, not just about their intentions of where they're shooting, but where it's actually landing. And that's the continued work of consciousness within ourself. I like the idea that we often judge ourselves by our intentions, but the world responds to us by our actions. And so just because I have a certain intention doesn't mean it's landing on the intended target. And my father was actually an excellent marksman. And because he was also a hoarder, my living room was littered with nearly hundreds of trophies. And perhaps one of the biggest growth areas for myself that has created positive change in my life has been to consciously create a gap between my emotional reaction to something and how I ultimately respond. In fact, recently, an old friend posted a pretty hateful, trolly comment on one of my YouTube videos. And this is a person that I was quite close with in my active drinking and drugging days. And over time, we grew so far apart. Being with her was so dissonant and actually toxic that I ended the relationship. And I won't go into the details of how it ended, but we basically just stopped talking to each other, and it was never acknowledged that it was actually like a breakup. And so my first reaction was to just delete the comment, because that doesn't need to be sitting out there on YouTube. And my heart rate went up. I had a full body reaction, and I knew I needed to wait until I calmed down to respond. And I made a phone call, and I talked to one of my wise and trusted friends. Honestly, didn't sleep very well, and I started to write a series of responses, none of which I planned to send without approval. And the first reactive letter was probably equally venomous to the comment that was posted. I knew I wasn't going to send that one, but it was good to get it out. Had another phone call to get a little more clarity on what it was I actually wanted. And what I wanted was closure. I don't want to fight. I'm open to a discussion, although I don't think it would be productive, because this person is still in a victim mentality and feels victimized by my leaving the relationship. And this is a friendship, not a romantic relationship. And so if someone's attached to being a victim, they need to have a perpetrator. And so I have to accept that they're not going to like me. They're not going to understand why I'm disappointing or hurting them. And I need to God bless them and let them have their own experience and focus on my own circle of influence. And so after a few drafts, I came to a very simple response. It basically said, the ending of relationships is sad and difficult. And I'm really sorry if the ending of ours has caused you pain. But it was a very conscious choice after much deliberation. And although it may look like self-centeredness to you, it is actually based in self-care for me. And they immediately sent another very venomous and hateful response with lots of reasons why I'm a terrible person. And I have to just let them have the last word because I'm not going to change their opinion of me. Not unless I want to lose integrity with my own self. So placing a gap or noticing that there already is a gap between a stimulus and our response. And in that space lies our power to choose how we respond regardless of the circumstance or situation. And so this idea of focusing on what we can control, what we do have power over, what Stephen Covey calls our circle of influence, directing our energy toward our own attitudes, actions, and decisions, the things that we do have control over, rather than focusing our energy on our circle of concern, which is everything that we care about but don't have direct control over. This is a massive shift. The shift of directing our energy toward the places we have power, our circle of influence, and pulling our energy out of our circle of concern, these things we care about but are powerless over. So examples might be like global issues, climate change, politics. We're powerless over other people's actions, their opinions. We're powerless over their life experience. We're powerless over the economy and traffic. And when we focus too much on our circle of concern, we can feel anxious and frustrated, and it really increases our sense of powerlessness because these issues are beyond our control. But when we focus on our circle of influence instead, things that we can directly impact or control, it allows us to make meaningful change within this circle of influence of our own life. As we make conscious choices about our behavior, our mindset, our work ethic, relationships, and skill development, we can make choices over how we respond to challenges that are directly in our life, even if they relate to these more global or larger issues. So when we practice proactively focusing on our circle of influence, on the things we can change, actually, over time, the size of our circle of influence can expand. A couple days after a recent election, I was on the phone with a friend who was deeply distressed, and she was driving on Route 880 in California. And while we were talking, she drove by this billboard and it said, "Everything's gonna be okay." She was like, whoa. And the next billboard said, "This is a good sign." You know, they have those digital billboards now that flip the screens. And then the next billboard said something about being kind in the world. And we laughed out loud because it felt like a direct answer and response from the universe of exactly what we were talking about. And I made a decision right then to get a bunch of stickers made up. Only cost me like $20. So I had 100 stickers made up that said, "This is a good sign. It's all going to be okay." And I've been carrying them around, sticking them up in public places. They're easily removable, so it's not really causing any harm to public areas. And it's my own little way to be proactive, to be a source of hope and kindness in the world, a little bit of humor, and it's fun. I'm not going to change the political situation, but I may be able to influence the experience of a couple of people who may come across these stickers as they walk through New York and Oakland. There's this wonderful story about a boy on a beach, and there's been some kind of a tide that's washed hundreds of starfish up onto the sand. And the tide's receding, and so the starfish are going to die in the sun. And the boy's picking the starfish up one at a time and flinging them like frisbees back into the water. And this older man comes up and he said, "Kid, why are you bothering doing that? You aren't going to make a difference with all these starfish." And the kid picks up a starfish and flips it into the water, and he said, "Bet it made a difference to that one." And so proactive people focus on their circle of influence and take deliberate actions over what they can control. And by concentrating on what you can control, we shift our energy away from frustration and toward constructive, positive action that really supports our personal growth and leads actually to greater effectiveness in the world. Reactive people, on the other hand, spend most of their time and energy in the circle of concern, worrying or raging about things they can't control. And this perspective really leads to a sense of stagnation, and it ultimately shrinks our circle of influence. It leaves us feeling hopeless and depressed, victimized by the world, and powerless, where being proactive supports our sense of personal power and agency, increases our hope, and that we are a positive creative influence in our own life and perhaps even in the larger system. So proactive people don't wait for conditions to be perfect or for other people to act first or for circumstances to happen to them. When we're proactive, we initiate positive change based on our own values and goals. In the language of proactivity, language is so powerful, the language we use in our head and the words that come out of our mouth. The language of proactivity is I can, I will, or I choose. And the language of reactivity says I have to, I can't, or if only. So I encourage you to consider embracing this first habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Focus on your circle of influence. Look for that gap between your reaction and your response and choose or become conscious of what you really want and how to get there. What's important to you? How do you want to respond rather than just acting out of your feelings? Spend some time in challenging situations considering what it is you can change and what it is you can't change. This is the idea of the serenity prayer, and it's an excellent daily prayer. God or Goddess, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That is focusing on our circle of influence rather than our circle of concern. So outgrowing blame of people, places, and things and bad luck, to take a gap between being driven by our feelings and our impulsive responses, and cultivate courage to move out of places we feel stuck or frustrated and live in the solution. And this is a lifelong practice because circumstances, people, and places will often change in our life. And we could even do this on a micro level in any moment or on a macro level looking at our whole life. What is my circle of influence? What do I have power over within myself for positive, constructive action? And what is just my circle of concern where I'm powerless? And my experience is that when I change myself, my experience of the world changes. Thank you so much for listening. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.